Hey guys, this is the Ryobi contactless infrared thermometer, and in this video we're going to be modifying this thermometer. So I've done a previous video on this in the past, and one problem that this thermometer has is this switch that switches between Fahrenheit and Celsius. So if you switch it to the left here where it has a C there, it's going to be Celsius, and to the right it's going to be Fahrenheit. So problem is this switch is it doesn't stay in place for Fahrenheit very well. So if you switch it over to Fahrenheit and you bump it just ever so slightly, it's going to switch back to Celsius. So when you slide this battery cover over, this battery cover covers both the switch and the battery, and when you slide that battery cover over, it will nudge the switch over to Celsius even when it's still supposed to be on Fahrenheit. See this? So here I'm switching it. You can see on Fahrenheit, if you nudge it over enough, it's going to switch over to Celsius. So see how I'm tapping it on it? I'm not actually moving it all the way over right there. Just tap on it a little bit, and right there. All right, so still Fahrenheit, but it does happen. I'm going to have to tap on it a little bit more, but usually every time I slide that door on, it nudges it over just enough that it switches over to Celsius. So I wanted to be able to switch between Celsius and Fahrenheit because I'm going to be using both. So I decided, yeah, see there, it came in as Celsius, even though it was switched over to Fahrenheit. I nudge it over back to Fahrenheit and it's back to Fahrenheit again. Anyways, the switch is not working properly. It's a little bit loose and it doesn't stay on on Fahrenheit the way it's supposed to. So we're going to take this thing apart and see what's wrong with it. And what I'm going to end up ultimately doing is actually modifying it and adding a new switch in there. And the switch it's going to be instead of replacing it with the same size switch, I'm going to replace it with a much larger switch that's going to kind of stick out. And I'll show you how that goes, but it's not going to work out perfectly, but I'll show you. It's interesting. It involves soldering wires and stuff like that. So you can see here, I am unscrewing it. So I'm going to unscrew all of these screws, and I'm just going to skip ahead here. I'm going to fast forward this a bit. So I'm just going to fast forward through this really quick because it took me longer than it should have to unscrew that. And almost there, last screw, there it is. Now, once I got all three screws out, this is a little bit tight, but not too bad. You can see there's some little clips there holding it together. But the way this is put together, it's a little bit awkward because of that gray thing on the front where the actual thermometer and laser comes out of it. So this ended up being a little bit awkward pulling this apart, but I eventually got it, and fitting it back together was a little bit awkward. You can see how that is. I want to pull it apart, but I don't want to actually break it at the same time. So you can see I spent a little bit of time. I kind of cut away there, cut a bit of time out, but you can see this is basically what I had to do. I just had to sort of pull this out, and I had to be a little bit careful with it to not break anything, but eventually I got this whole thing pulled out. It's a little awkward, and if you look at the inside, the way these things are slotted, that has to do with there's a little slot that's on the inside of it that catches on this black cylinder in there, and that's what made it difficult. Now this thing I'm holding there, that's the trigger, and here's a spring for the trigger. The trigger pushes this little button on the circuit board below there. So I'm going to point that out. So this little thing here on the trigger pushes that button, and I'm going to point it out if you can kind of see it in there. That button is what actually activates the thermometer. So I'm going to kind of poke at that a little bit with the screwdriver here. That's basically how that functions. And you can see there is, all right, that switch right there, that is the actual, so that you saw that before, but that's the switch that actually, toggles between Celsius and Fahrenheit. And I'm going to have to rip that out. And you can see behind it, there's actually a little, there's a little tiny speaker behind there that beeps every time you pull the trigger. So I'm going to pop this guy right on out. So I'm basically just trying to force this out without actually breaking it or pulling too hard on the wires there. But there we go. And I'm going to sort of hold this up close so you can see it a little bit better. You can't, with the lighting, you can't quite see in there. I'm going to get a closer view in a bit, but you see how that flips there. And I'm going to sort of zoom in here. Now, notice there's only 2 wires going to the switch, but there's 3 terminals on it. So if it's on the left for Celsius, that means basically 1 wire is not connecting to anything. That middle wire connects to nothing, right? If you switch it to the left, it's that middle wire and that 1 terminal with nothing on it. If you switch it to the right, it's that middle wire and the right side wire that are connected. So essentially when you flip it to the right for Fahrenheit, it connects those two wires. So if I were to rip this switch off and solder those wires together, it would be permanently set to Fahrenheit. If I were to just snip these wires and never connect them, it would be permanently Celsius. And you can see there, I turned a light on, and if you look closely enough, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but there's this little metal thing that goes up into the switch, and it's just not tight enough, and I think it comes loose. So I was almost thinking that I should replace that switch with one the same size, since I do have some switches the same size, but I decided against it. I decided to put this much larger switch in its place, and I stripped it using these wire strippers. So I use those wire strippers for this, and I'm actually going to use the wire strippers to snip this switch off and to strip those wires too. So you're going to see that. And the reason I decided to, so I'm just going to snip this off here. The reason I decided to replace it with a bigger switch is because I actually wanted to I felt it would be nicer to use a bigger switch, and I wanted to actually put it on the outside of this thermometer rather than keeping it hidden under that door where the battery is. I actually feel like this is going to be an upgrade. Instead of just fixing the switch, I want to upgrade this thermometer to be something that has a switch on the outside, and you don't have to open up that awkward battery door just so that I can, change between Celsius and Fahrenheit. All right, now this is me awkwardly soldering these wires together. So I was trying to hold the wire still while also getting some solder on there and also holding the soldering iron. It was a little bit awkward, a little bit messy, and I did a lot of fumbling around off camera that you didn't see here, but I eventually got this soldered together, and this was holding on pretty well here. I apologize, it's not focused on the wire as much as it is focused on the tool behind it. I eventually switched to use this. So I switched to hold the entire thermometer and all the wires and everything using these clamps, because it was just way too awkward just holding it with my hands. And I figured I'd take the time to set this up and solder it properly, and this worked out a whole lot better. So this ended up working out pretty nicely, and I even touched up the first wire that I had originally soldered on. I ended up touching this up and neatening up the soldering joint on there, and I got them both soldered on pretty nicely here. I spent a little bit of time touching it up and getting it just right, and it all worked out pretty nicely. So after this, I went ahead and took the whole thing out of these clamps, and I decided at this point I kind of wanted to just test it just to make sure it's working. So I'm going to reattach the battery. Before I reassemble this whole thing, I just want to make sure it's all working. I know I just soldered a switch and that's it, nothing too complicated. Just want to kind of verify that it's working here. So I don't actually have the trigger in place yet, so I'm going to actually activate this by using this screwdriver to push the button, and you can see here Celsius. So we have it set to Celsius, and it works. I pull the trigger, it takes the temperature in Celsius. So I'm going to flip the switch, flip it from a 0 to a 1, and let's try it again. I'm going to push the button again using the screwdriver, and we've got Fahrenheit, 78 degrees there. So we verified this is in fact working. So got this thermometer working perfectly now. And next step, I'm going to actually use this Dremel tool. So I didn't have enough space, and I spent some time thinking about where I wanted to put the switch and how I wanted it to stick out. And I never got it working exactly the way I want. I'm still going to have to figure something out with hot glue. But the one thing I definitely needed to do was to use the Dremel to go ahead and just cut out a section here. I need to cut out a space both for the wire to fit through and for this actual switch to actually fit in here. And I'm actually going to have to go in and cut a piece of the little door that closes the little battery door on the handle. And as you can tell, this part of the video where I'm dremeling this, I did this all on fast forward. So, what I'm saying I'm doing, and, the actual video is a little bit out of sync, but there you go. That's basically how I did it. And this door fits right on here. And you see how the switch fits in there like that? It sort of sticks out. It does not work that great. It's functional, right? The thermometer works great, and I can flip the switch anytime I want, but it is kind of messy how that just sticks out like that, and it is that's suboptimal. That is really not acceptable. It's usable, but really not. I can't leave it that way. So the idea is I wanted to put some hot glue in here to hold it in place. It wouldn't look pretty, but that would be very functional. Problem is, if you look here where the battery is, it's way too close to where the battery connector fits in. If I put hot glue on that side, it just isn't going to fit. That would be way too tight for that to really work. It's just not going to fit there. And if you look on the other side, like if you look in here, I turned the light on so you can see how tight that is. And if you I'm going to show you in a second the other side of this switch right here. If you look in there, you can see behind it, if you look really closely, the little darker area, that's actually the trigger. And when you pull that trigger, that needs to move, right? So if I put hot glue behind that switch, it's going to prevent that from moving. And now I might be able to put like a small amount of hot glue right on the side of this, but I'm going to have to be really careful about it. So for now, I left it without hot glue, and I'm going to think about what to do next. That might be in a future video, but for now, I'm going to leave it as is. So it's suboptimal, but it's something. Anyways, if you found this video interesting, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and you're going to want to hit that subscribe button because we do a lot of other great tool-related stuff. This is the first time I've modified something in one of my videos, but we do a lot of great tool videos you're not going to want to miss out on. So hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon. That's it for today. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on that next video.